Now,
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Salatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This is your brother Rex Nazako, the Executive Director of the American Muslim Engagement and Empowerment Network, also known as Amin, coming live to you with coverage on the rapidly unfolding and evolving situation in Syria. I am joined today for coverage and analysis by Dr. Abdul Majid Katranji, who's a renowned community leader who's been heavily involved in the Syrian situation for the past decade and a half since its beginnings. And joining us live through Zoom, we have Dr. Sinan Hatahit from the Atlantic Council and Dr. Abdurrahman Al-Hajj from the Syria Memory Institute, joining us in direct from Turkey. Welcome, Jazakallah khair. Thank you for joining us.
thank you for having us.
So today,
Thank you.
inshallah, we will be breaking down the situation that has unfolded in Syria over the past 3 days with the rapid rebel advance on government strongholds in Aleppo, Halab, and now we're hearing reports coming from Hama and the countryside of Homs as well. There has been a collapse of government defense and infrastructure in Syria. And the Syrian National Army and the forces of the Syrian Salvation Government have rapidly moved from Idlib into securing key positions in Halab and Hama and their countrysides. I will go first to Dr. Abdul Majid Katranji for a quick analysis on this situation and a quick breakdown for us.
Yeah, so simply put for our viewers, and thank you very much for joining us, is that over the past 72 hours, initial skirmishes that occurred in the northern and western countryside of Aleppo with several key villages were basically taken over by Syrian rebel forces, freedom fighters, however you want to categorize them. And as they moved into the area, a green light was opened up as Syrian military forces that represented the defense of the Assad regime began to withdraw systemically. And therefore, the forces entered into Aleppo in an almost relatively bloodless entry, taking over the military sites and installations as well as the city, its key intersections and key infrastructure, including the airport. And then over the past 12 hours, very rapidly, the same forces were able to head south toward the city of Hama and its countryside. And from the most recent reports, and obviously our guests from overseas will give us some clarification on some details, that area now is under control with more information indicating that several areas in which the Syrian regime military forces are in general dissipating and withdrawing from all positions except the most hardline supporters of the Assad regime, as well as certain elements that were introduced by the Assad regime, independent militias from other countries that are also trying to fight and defend for their survival. So this is a summary of the facts as we are able to know them. Obviously, for a lot of our viewers, I know you're getting things on WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram, and things like that. Our goal here is to really focus on the facts, not on the rumors, and really to try to highlight and summarize to the best of our ability for our viewers what's going on as the Syrian people who have endured a lot of hardship and a lot of horror over the past 14 years now are seeing a change and potentially some hope for a democratic future.
And thank you, Dr. Abdul Majid. I want to go to our guests joining us live. I'm going to begin with Dr. Sinan Hatahit. What are you hearing from the ground, and what is the situation like within the year there?
For hosting us today on the show. I'm happy to convey the echoes running on the ground. So primarily, I think the first and most clear voice is the happiness of a lot of the IDPs, especially in Idlib and also northern Aleppo. They've left their town in 2016. Some of them were just hoping and maybe dreaming of returning home. So there is just a few minutes before joining this call, I had a good friend of mine who was part of this group, evacuated in 2016, and his major sentiment was a sentiment of justice and liberation. Of course, also at the same time, we have to recognize there is concern among also some of the population in Aleppo. Not a security concern, fear of physical harm, but rather a fear of what's going to happen next, who's going to govern the city, how are we going to protect the city from the air, especially from Russian air forces. Russian air forces haven't been very active in the first 48 hours, but has since yesterday night started bombarding some regions within the city and also on the northern suburbs. So these are concerns that are valid, and liberating forces needs at this point to start making uh, making, let's say, a new narrative, creating a new narrative to appease these fears, to appease these concerns, and actually also to put in the work. And this is what we're right now witnessing. And and the last thing, that the last news, best of news that we just received, is that the Salvation Government Prime Minister have issued a white call to all the bureaucracy and technocracy used to run the city of Aleppo to come back and assume their responsibilities, and that they will be protected, and they will be also paid their salaries in order to keep the city running, which is, I think, a very mature sign, a sign of maturity, and very hopeful for the future.
Right. Thank you for that. Thank you for that breakdown and that information. Over the past 6 years, there has been a ceasefire agreement in place between the rebels and the regime, facilitated by regional powers. Recently, the regime broke the ceasefire agreement by indiscriminately firing on positions and civilian infrastructure as well, including, from what we hear, a Quran school. Um, I want to go to Dr. Abdurrahman and get your opinion and your analysis on how did this happen so fast, and why did the regime infrastructure in Aleppo and in Hama and in the countryside collapse so suddenly? I mean, this was completely unexpected.
First, thank you so much for joining me your podcast. And I actually about this very important question. I think many people now asking about it, even the Syrian people inside. Actually, there is. I think there is three reasons for that. First, there is an economic crisis, and there is no nothing pushing the soldiers to fighting for Assad regime, to protect Assad regime. No reason to fight for them. They have very bad situation. People also they don't like to stay in the same situation. The second issue is also there is the Iranian militias around this area, also maybe across Syria. They are also very weak after bombing within past weeks. So I think also this is another reason. The third, which is very important, the Russia Air Force. Before a few years, there was around 20 aircraft. Now we are talking about just four. So it's a very different case. And there is also on the other side, there is a very advanced organizing for the fighters, for opposition fighters. This is probably have affect a lot about how they control or how they lead the battles on the ground. One of the most important issue that they have also advanced technology, which before they don't have this technology. For example, they have drones. They advanced this drones to reach 120 kilometer, for example. Rockets. Also, they have training for many years. So these facts actually, or the factors. Sorry, these factors maybe together effect on the situation on the ground and make the situation like we see nowadays.
So it seems that over the past 6 years, the Syrian Salvation Government, which is a coalition of rebel groups centered around the Idlib and its surroundings, has worked on a state building project, essentially. And I think that not only on their military capabilities on this, it seems to have reflected on their political and governing infrastructure and the mechanisms that they're implementing in their advance as well. I wanna go back a little bit to the point of Russia and the collapse of the regime infrastructure, because what's been exposed here is that really it doesn't seem like the Syrian regime, the Assad regime, had a functioning military. So one, I believe it seems like Russia, Iran, and maybe some regional actors see Assad as a liability, someone who's been extremely inefficient in furthering their strategic agenda and governing and stabilizing the country. But number two, it seems that this Syrian regime army was just a paper tiger. It was fluffed up by other forces, propping it up. And with the dynamic global situation that has unfolded in Ukraine and in the Middle East, uh, it seems that that kind of myth kind of collapsed. What do you make of that, Dr. Katranji?
I think there's no question. I think we should look at like February of 2023. You had a horrific earthquake that struck and created significant disruptions into Idlib province and also at the same time into Aleppo and other parts of the surrounding countryside. From what could be seen on the ground in terms of the work and the humanitarian relief efforts, the ability to provide and deliver support into these structures, into the Idlib province, was met with far greater efficiency than what could be accomplished in the areas that were controlled by the regime. Although the regime had nearly a 10 to 15 to 1 ratio of support and infrastructure, because globally, the area of Idlib is primarily administered by Turkey. And Syria remains a state recognized by the United Nations and has the infrastructure support that comes with it through the United Nations in terms of relief agencies. It showed a significant breakdown in terms of the quality and the effort of institutional control between one area in Idlib, where it was very efficient, versus in the governance areas. And I think that that type of stress only continued to repeat itself subsequently as other events unfolded. Obviously, most recently, what we saw in the war of Israel against Gaza and in Lebanon. So key strategic positions. I think that you had a president who relied on foreign forces to maintain his legitimacy. And ultimately, for these foreign forces, foreign governments, mainly Russia and Iran, it's a question of what have you done for me lately, and what are you capable of producing. And I think that there's a significant, there's a clear deficit on the resources and the capacity of the Syrian government under the control of the Assad regime or the Assadists, however they want to be terminated. Whereas the efficiencies that could be seen in Idlib created a potential power structure that other forces at play in the Middle East could actually deal with and engage with in a positive fashion. That's not to say that they've picked a winner. I think what it is to say is that the reality on the ground is that Assad is clearly the loser. And that's the question: is he salvageable? I would obviously defer to my colleagues.
And that's what I want to ask, because there's been a lot of theory and a lot of rumors that have emerged since this kind of blitz operation began about 72 hours ago. And I want to address and I want to ask our experts for their opinion on the geopolitical motivations behind this? What are you hearing on the ground? And can you dispel some of these rumors that have been coming out regarding the Syrian rebel forces and the Syrian Salvation Government? So I'll start with Dr. Sinan, and then we'll hear from Dr. Abdurrahman al-Hajj as well.
I mean, we have to put this all of this in a regional geopolitical context, which is 7th of October, at war that was started against the people of Gaza, and the shifting dynamics when it comes to Iranian-backed armed groups in the region. So the assassination of Hassan Nasrallah. The quick also dismissal and dismantlement of Hezbollah military force, especially in southern Lebanon, has also created a void in Syria. Iranian forces also in Syria have been targeted by Israeli air forces, which also created a shifting. Has shifted their presence, has shifted also their support to Assad. All of this created a very favorable battlefield for the groups to seize. And if we take a step back also in time, you have to remember that northern Aleppo and Idlib is one of the most dense populated region in Syria. It hosts around 5 million people. 2/3 are IDPs. 2/3 are IDPs not only from Aleppo, Hama, Homs, you name it, from Damascus and suburbs of Damascus. And they've been yearning.
IDP, for our viewers, IDP is internally displaced
persons or people.
Yes.
Please continue.
And exactly, and thank you for that. And they are yearning to return to their hometowns, and they are not living in the best conditions. Yes, whether it's local councils led by the Syrian interim government or the Syrian Salvation Government are doing the best with the means at hand, but still the infrastructure is historically weak. It has been weakened further by the war and the destruction led by the regime forces and Russian air forces before 2020. So it was waiting to explode, and with the right discipline, waiting for the opportune moment to intervene. What we saw is exactly the result that has unfolded the last few days. And as we speak, many of the cities that used to be overcrowded are now moving, in convoy after another, not to join the front line to fight, but to return to their homes. So shortly after, liberating them. So I think the attacking forces were taken by surprise by how fast the regime crumbled. Now there is no sense for them to wait or to sit and see where the regime is going. This is exactly what happened with Hama. Now, if they're able to move beyond Hama, they will keep moving till they reach Homs. If they reach Homs, they move till they reach Damascus, and so on and so forth. And this even gave ideas to other opposition armed groups, like in Horan, in Dar'a, where they have been dormant for a while after striking a deal with the Syrian state, and same also in Deir ez-Zor. All of these are also people that are yearning for freedom, and they're getting inspired by what's happening in northern Syria. Is Assad someone who's salvageable? I think since October 7, he was put more and more into a tight position. He tried his best to silence him, to silence Syria, to He did all he could do not to not to speak against in support of Hamas, not to speak against Israel. Have really tried to be as calm, as reserved as possible, so not to pick any revenge from Israel. He hasn't succeeded in that, and he also didn't help the Iranians or his traditional allies as he was supposed to or expected to. So now he's a lost of choices. He has to leave one way or another. And I think even if the military campaign stops at Hama or Homs and doesn't advance beyond that, the opposition now is much better placed to sit on the negotiating table and to negotiate this ousting. And I think he has lost his purpose for Russia. He has lost his purpose for Israel. He has lost his purpose for Iran. Maybe Iran is the one that is today struggling with his loss more than any others. But even the Iranians are very pragmatic regional actors, and they know that they cannot keep betting on him endlessly.
Yeah, and I think it's been evidently clear that the greatest promoters of the status quo with Israel have been Arab dictators in the region. And I want Dr. Abdurrahman Al-Hajj, if you can speak briefly to this idea, because some of the rumors and conspiracies that go around is that the Syrian people's fight for freedom is an Israeli project, right? It's a Zionist project, which, I mean, it sounds off, because if there's anyone who's benefited Israel up to this point, it's the status quo preservation that has come from the Assad regime and from surrounding Arab rulers and dictators in the region. So, can you speak briefly to the revolution's character and nature?
I don't hear your question very well, so because it's very low for my side.
Abdurrahman, I think what what's being asked is, can you give us a summary that there's been a lot of rumors on the internet, and that's one of the challenges is how do you present facts to people? And there's all these conspiracy theories that are saying that what's happening in Syria right now is actually run by Israel, that this is actually an effort by Israel to destabilize Syria or however it wants to go. And can you highlight the position historically? As a matter of fact, Israel said dealing with Assad is the devil you know, and that in the internet realm, this is the opposites being discussed. Can you highlight the history of the Assad position and how things are looking moving forward in terms of what is motivating the current efforts by these rebel groups as they've suddenly expanded so quickly, so rapidly?
Again, I want to make your question very short to understand what I
Can you
have to
can you explain to our viewers what are the facts about why what's happening in Syria is happening now?
Yeah.
I'll say it in Arabic real quick. إذا بتقدر توضح للناس الموضوع إنه في كتير ناس عم تحكي إنه هي اللي عم يصير بسوريا من طرف إسرائيل، ولكن من تاريخيا بيحكوا لك إنه إسرائيل كانت تقول إنه الأسد هو الشيطان اللي بنعرفه، يعني من ناحية العلاقة. بس طبعا في أعضاء بالإنترنت أو موجودين بيحكوا غير الشيء. بتقدر توضح للناس شو السبب الرئيسي اللي عم تخلي الافتتاح أو التوسع الانقلابي أو المعارضة اللي نحن عم نشوفه على الأرض اليوم؟
Thank you for your question. I actually know this is a very common question nowadays, and actually, it's simply because it has come in the same time or after a few days from the agreement in Lebanon, and after a very hard time for Hezbollah, which targeting and bombing by Israel. So probably this is the reason. And the reason which make people easily to make connection between what happening in Syria and what happened in Lebanon. So, but actually, in the ground, this event which happened in Syria prepared at least 1 year before and more actually. And we know as people, as Syrian people who are very close from the Free Syrian armies and governments inside Syria, we have information uh, that there is preparing I mean, for fighting a regime and to occupy more land for them. This is not nothing new. So first, I understand, and probably more people find this is the time is very close between these two events, huge events. And also, before 1 day or 2 days, some of Israeli leaders say that Assad playing by fire. So also, it's probably effect. They are able to make this connection. But probably we need to explain for people that the protests in north of Syria, I mean, in the place of the opposition for Gaza, it's continue for 1 year. So it is probably the number of protests in north of Syria. It's probably more than the other protests in all the Arab world. So there is a very emotional or emotional connection between Syrian and the Palestinian. So we cannot imagine as a Syrian that there is any relation between Syria and Israel and Israel. But also there is a propaganda for against the opposition, which led by Iranian groups. We see that the foreign minister have some statements about that yesterday, and we expect that it's happened always, even from Qassad. I mean, from Kurdish forces. They also want to say that there is two terms actually used nowadays. First, they are terrorists, and they are also probably have agenda related to Israel. But this is just a propaganda, and there is no actually on the ground any relations. We prepare, or the rebels prepare this battles or this event before 2 years, and there is no any connection between of them.
Yeah, I think there's been this misunderstanding, especially from pro-Palestinian voices, and not necessarily within the Palestinian ranks, more so speaking about people in the left wing of American politics who consider anything anti-Western to essentially be the best choice, right? It's this very binary view of the world that anything that's anti-American is automatically anti-imperialist. Whereas we have Russia, which is an imperialist power itself that has blood on his hands with Muslims for centuries. And there's been this misunderstanding that Assad has been this key piece in playing 4D chess for support of Palestinian resistance, when in reality that's never been the case. And Assad has more so been an opportunist who has seized the chance to get support from regional powers like Iran and global powers like Russia to stay in power and cling on to his seat with no true ideological motivation behind that. But these rumors are unfortunately very prominent, especially among community circles who try to paint the Syrian crisis as a sectarian issue, when in reality it simply wasn't. It was a grassroots organic movement for freedom, regardless of religious or ethnic background within Syria. And I think a lot of the characteristics of that original movement still reflect to this day.
Yeah, I think at least in light of the protests that we saw in Sweden, right? So this is a primarily Druze community. The region of Sweden is primarily Druze, and they have been protesting vehemently against the regime. And this is a religious ethnic minority within the pantheon that the Assad regime complained that it was protecting, but they became fed up with the corruption that was just absolutely persistent and actually the failure to deliver. And again, to echo Abdurrahman's sentiment and Sinan's sentiment, at least, and they can obviously, they're closer to the facts on the ground. The information that we've been getting is that even institutional support from bureaucrats and from military officials that are officially part of the Assad regime or part of the government of Syria haven't been paid in months. That their wages can't compete with the needs and the demands that exist. That infrastructure support, so for instance, if you're in Idlib, the electricity runs about 24 hours a day. If you need gas, you can get gas in Idlib 24 hours a day. In other parts of Syria, the average electricity time can be as little as an hour and a half a day. The ability and the cost of diesel and kerosene to run your car or warm your home has far exceeded the capacity for most people to be able to afford. And you're looking at even the a famous TV show that shows up on Ramadan about a woman going around trying to find out how expensive just holding a regular Ramadan meal is. And from the beginning of Ramadan till the end of Ramadan, the prices continue to skyrocket and rise. So you can actually see that food prices don't affect people by the basis of their religion or what sect they are or what ethnic background. When the cost of kerosene is $8, it's $8 for everybody, except for those in the regime who seem to benefit and get their hands on those things first. So
there's an interesting parallel to draw with American elections here and the voting patterns and trends among the general American electorate, and that's that governance essentially boils down to these simple provisions of service, and it seems like the situation in Syria, especially under the Assad regime, has deteriorated to an irreversible point, especially economically. It's been very clear that Assad has been on a lifeline here. And now that that lifeline seems to have been cut off, not just from the militias, but it seems from Iran and from Russia as well, who see him as a liability, his days realistically may be numbered. And that remains to be seen. I do want to ask Dr. Sinan, did Gaza play a role in this?
To support Hezbollah and the Iranian factions as he was expected to, but that wasn't enough, to get by as he used to. And I think that the Israeli wanted more out of Bashar Assad. They wanted peace, or at least negotiation for peace. And as I previously said, the Israeli attacks on Hezbollah in Lebanon has created a void in Syria. That void was exploited in return by the Syrian opposition. That doesn't say that there was any kind of collaboration whatsoever, not at all. And there is two things I want to clarify here. The first one is, first of all, the way that Israel and the Western world looks at a lot of the Syrian opposition, they look at them as Islamist. And they do not trust them. They think that, rightfully maybe, that they are, by nature, pro-Palestine, pro-Gaza, pro-Hamas. And that, is a bold brush, that everyone is being painted with. Second one is also the Israeli, official statements. Just a few hours ago, there was a statement issued by the IDF saying that they are looking with the Americans very closely at what's happening and unraveling in Syria, and that they are preparing the eventuality of a dismissal of Bashar al-Assad. And if that happens, they are going to target all the Syrian strategic weapons so they do not fall in the hands of the Syrian rebels. So that speaks volume about who Israel believe is the biggest threat
threat.
to
The
his
threat, yes.
presence in Syria.
It speaks to the status quo relationship between the Assad regime and Israel. There's clearly an element of uncertainty from Israel, which is often seen almost as like an omnipotent force in the region, which just doesn't seem to be the case here.
Yeah. So, and at the end, as we've seen throughout the 14 years of Syrian revolution, there is no clear white and black, and yes, the dismiss of Hezbollah and the alienation of his forces in Syria as a response to Gaza, has been perceived as unjust by many Muslim and Arab people. But it was also a chance for the Syrian opposition to advance, because these forces, the Hezbollah forces that were engaged in Syria, the same that were then transferred to Lebanon, were also responsible for many massacres against civilians in Qusayr, in Aleppo itself, and they were stationed in Zahra Nobel, just a few kilometers away from Idlib, from Aleppo, and they were and both cities were being bombarded the last 6 months, and this is very important to remember. This attack seems like an offensive, but it started as a defensive attack because this region was being bombarded systematically by regime forces since October 7th. Even though it is a de-escalation area, there is an agreement signed by Russia and Turkey. There were several calls by the UN Security Council to de-escalate again. It was the regime and the Hezbollah and the Iran-backed force that kept insisting on targeting civilians, targeting mosques, targeting busy marketplaces. And so, yes, it played to the chance of the opposition that Hezbollah was attained, and they filled the void. And I think we'll quickly see and prove again that this, despite being linked to Gaza indirectly, it is for the best of both the Syrian people and the Palestinian people that we get rid of Bashar Assad as soon as possible.
Yeah, and I wanna wrap it up. Thank you both for your analysis and insight.
I'd love to just ask Abdurrahman one question, if
Yeah,
that's okay.
please, go ahead.
Abdurrahman, with your experience also with the Syria Memory Institute and looking, the number of groups that were, I think the initial failure with the Syrian opposition
Absolutely. They have now better relations between of them. They are working together better than before. Actually, they have some problem between of them, and within this preparing for this attack, they keep their problem outside and working together. It's clear, and you see that these groups have the different ideology. They are not the same. Some of them actually that have the big crisis against the other, like جبهة الشامية وهيئة تحرير الشام. They have some problems in 2021, for example. There is attack from HT, HTS or Hatch. They have attack against الجبهة الشامية, and a lot of soldiers or fighters has been killed. So even it's happened now, they reach to the point they think that if they want to do anything effective against Assad regime, they have to be together. And actually, it takes around 1 year for this agreement. And now, comparing with the past time, Now they before 2 years, and they educated from this college. So it's now different totally based on first they have a different experience. They have also a new idea, or maybe they have some probably someone outside pushes them to be together, but finally they become together and working together to make this attack. And also most of them actually from the same area. I mean, the leaders are from the same area, especially from the north of Syria, so the north of Syria, sorry. A lot of them actually have homes very close from this area. So you think that if they want to succeed, or they think that if they want to succeed, they have to make corporation together and make it successful. I think yes, comparing with the past, now they are working together, and one of the element which we can, or one of the factor which we can mention why they successful is this factor actually.
And as a successful, united community that helps itself and helps Muslims abroad as well, inshallah.
And others.
Yes.
And non-Muslims.
And
Yeah.
non-Muslims
Yeah.
as well. So injustice anywhere is an enemy to justice everywhere.
Correct.
And I want to thank Dr. Sinan and Dr. Abdurrahman for joining us and providing us their insightful analysis. Thank you so much, Jazakallah khair. And
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I want to thank Dr. Katranji, who's going to be a way more frequent
Thank you.
guest appearing in these segments in the future as well. For your first and foremost for your work and your contribution to our community and to the Syrian cause as well. And with that, our respected brothers and sisters and our dear viewers, we're wrapping up this segment, inshallah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant freedom, dignity, and success to all freedom loving people, whether they be in Syria, Palestine, and elsewhere.